In this lesson, we'll talk about some UV layout concepts in Mudbox. So as we start to paint our textures in Mudbox, most of the time we're going to be working with UV-based textures. So UV layout, if you're not familiar with that, is just a way of deciding how polygons will accept a particular texture. Because the models that we're working with are three-dimensional and the textures that we work with are two-dimensional flat images, the program needs to know how to apply that flat image to our 3D object, so kind of how to wrap it around. So a UV layout enables us to decide how that actually happens. So here I'm at the lowest level of our little imp character. We can actually see the current UV layout by going into the UV View tab. And you can think of each one of these boxes or squares as one texture map. And so our UVs should exist inside here. Right now we don't have any UVs, so we can't create a UV-based texture. We can use PTEX, but we'll use that in a little bit. That's something that's a little bit different. So what we need to do is actually create some UVs for our model. The UVs will be typically created at the lowest level or lower level. You can create UVs in Mudbox, so we could go up to UVs and maps, and we could say create UVs. We could choose the number of tiles. So if you remember, each one of these squares is considered a tile. So you can spread out your texture maps over multiple tiles. The advantage of doing that is that you're able to get all the resolution here for something like just the head, let's say. Otherwise, you have to squeeze all the polygons into this single space, which makes you create a texture that includes the whole body. And depending on the resolution of your texture, if there's a part of the body that needs a large amount of texture space, it may only get a few pixels down here. So you can spread those across multiple tiles. So go to create UVs, we'll just say one tile, and we'll say OK to that. So it's going to automatically create some UVs. So now if we wanted to paint on this guy right now, we could immediately start to paint a UV-based texture map on him. But if we go and look in our UV view, you can see this is what the UVs look like. So it's basically taken each polygon and broken it out and laid it out flat into this texture space. So painting in the 3D view, it would look fine. We could paint just like we normally would. But if we were to come in and look at our texture map afterwards, it would be all broken up. There'd basically be a seam around every polygon. We don't really want that. It would be nice to have a little bit more of a user-friendly UV layout to make a little bit more sense of. But in a pinch, if you need to have UVs to be able to start painting, you can paint in here on the automatic map that's created, automatic UV layout. Okay. Another way to do this would be to take this geometry out to another application to create UVs for. So let's select this guy, and what we can do is we can either export him or we can just send it over to the application that we're going to be using. So I've got him selected. We can just say send to Maya, and I'm going to actually add him to the current scene. So let's say add to current scene, and we'll jump over to Maya. And here we've got this guy added in. It's the lower level that was retopologized. So if we jump into our UV texture editor, and let me just drag it over so you can see it. You'll see that same square, and you can see the same UVs here. I select one of these faces, you can see where that face is actually located. And so what we want to do now is kind of recreate UVs for this. And there are different ways of doing this. I'm not going to get too in-depth in UVs. This is a Mudbox course, so but I do want to just show you. We'll just create an automatic map. That'll kind of break things out into different pieces. And then you can start to manipulate this and move things around. So here, you've got the face. So I can select that shell and kind of rotate it around. You can see where these parts are broken apart. I can go to Edge just by right-clicking, and I'll move and sew. And what that'll do is take all those disparate pieces and move them into position, and then we can use Unfold, and that will kind of clean this up. And so the idea is we start to piece this back together, but in a flat plane. So what that means is there will be seams in certain areas where you'll have cuts. Now, because we're painting in 3D in Mudbox, Mudbox takes care of all those seams. So we won't really see those, but typically you'll still put those in areas where they're not going to be very obvious. So behind the head, underneath the arms, things like that. All right, so we would now go in here, and you could lay out the UVs in this 0 to 1 space, or you could tile it. So what I've done here is, let me just hide this one. If I turn on this UV done and select this guy that's already been UV'd, I can go into the texture editor. You can see I've just laid out the textures in the 0 to 1. Here is the body, and then one tile over in the U direction are the arms and legs, and then the head is in the last tile. So just keep in mind that you can tile these, and Mudbox can understand that. You just want to make sure to stay away from the border. So you want to be in the middle of this square. Okay, you can get very close to the border, but you don't want to touch it. Same thing here. I've left a little bit of room. This is probably maybe a little bit too close, so I can kind of move this over a little bit. You also don't want to overlap UVs, because any of your painted detail that you paint under polygons that are overlapping, that's going to be duplicated on that overlapping polygon. All right, so let's say that we've now done the UVs in our third-party application, in this case Maya, and now we want to import those back in and update it. And we want to keep all the subdivision levels and all the sculpted detail, of course, on our model. So what we can do is we can send this back, and that would transfer it one way. But if we actually export this out, we can do it a little bit quicker. And so without having to project any of the sculpted detail, we can just go back in and we'll just export this as an OBJ. I've just exported it as imp_UV. And so now what we would do is go back into Mudbox. We've got our object selected, and so what we can do is go to File, and instead of importing, we'll go to Import UVs. Now if you send this back over, it'll use this transfer details, which is a way of transferring sculpted information from a model with one topology to a model with another topology. And you can do it that way, but if you're just changing the UVs, you can also come in here and just import the UVs through here. So again, we'll take a look at the UVs. Those are the current UVs. We'll go to File, Import UV, and let's select, I'm going to go to the Mudbox or the Maya files, scenes, and this imp UV OBJ. Now you can match by vertex ID or position. We haven't changed vertex ID, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. And now let's check and make sure the UVs have come in. There's our UVs spread over 3 different tiles. So we can see those the same as they were in Maya. Let's check and make sure that all of our sculpted detail has come through. So I'm just going to page up to cycle through the levels up to the highest level. All right, now if let me just kind of select off of this for a second. So now if we go into the UVs for this guy, you can see here that we're at the higher level, and you can still see the UVs. If you go up a higher level and you don't see your UVs, what you can do is recreate your level UVs. So if you have UVs on a lower level and you subdivide, you can recreate those for whatever level it is that you're happen to be working on. All right, so if you take a look at the cushions, you can see those have UVs as well. And then if we take a look at this back piece, you can see that it doesn't. So we would want to come in and again transfer that over, create UVs. This would be a pretty simple UV layout because it's just basically a plane that's bent, and then bring it back in, import those UVs. So UVs are very important, not only for painting textures, but also for extracting maps. So if you want to extract a displacement or normal map or any kind of map that you want to extract from your sculpted geometry, you want to have a UV layout so that your program knows how to kind of assign the textural detail to each polygon, how it's sort of laid out. All right, and we'll look at the PTeX project process a little bit later, and that is a texturing process that is UV less, so we won't have to worry about UVs at that point. Okay, so now that we've got our UVs sort of figured out, let's come in the next lesson and take a look at painting the body. Now, if you want to access the UV layout that I have, this will be in this project file. Obviously, the geometry that I have may be slightly different because of the retopology than the topology that you're working with, And so, you can use your UVs, or you can come in and take a look at the UVs that I have either in this Mudbox scene. So it would be 24 begin would be for the next lesson, or in this Maya file, which I'll save out as imp_UV. You can go in and take a look at it there. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So in the next lesson, we'll come in and start to paint the little creature here.